Hello again. After doing a little bit of quality check on the video that I published yesterday about our demonstration in Google Colab, I realized once when I shared my screen and moved my monitor display that you were no longer able to see the screen and the different demo itself. So if you're able to get through everything without seeing it, that's great. But I'm going to go through it again and make sure that you can see all the different cells that I'm running within Google Colab. Also give a little bit more context to what I'm expecting for the first homework submission, and even just how to post it on Blackboard itself and upload the assignment in the way that I'm expecting. So let's dive in. I just checked to make sure that it all works, that you'll be able to see it. So let me share my screen. And we will go through it again as if this goes along with yesterday. So we have a new notebook here that I created just by hitting File, New Notebook. Also, the link I posted in Blackboard should also accomplish this. And you see this general environment where it's pretty much a blank, open canvas for us to start coding and writing in Markdown and really creating a nice visual interface that explains what you're doing, but also executes everything. So I added a few different comment cells, which is anything where you can run it. That means it's code, but it's a comment because there's a little hashtag in front of it. So nothing came out of this. So this was just a little bit of infrastructure for me to remember what exactly I wanted to go through today together. But other aspects that maybe we should discuss, the main buttons that you might want to use is to insert a code cell or a text cell. So something like a code cell, if you hit plus, it'll insert it right below. And from just a very basic demonstration, let's show what something like print hello world would look like. So you can hit the play button and we will see that that returns hello world. So this is code. And let's compare that to something where you would use text, which is Markdown. So let's say I even tried to do the same thing, hello world. As if this was code, you will see there is no play button because it's Markdown. So if I hit Shift Enter, it'll just show as if it's Markdown. So just wanted to demonstrate the difference. And something like Markdown, you can now use other elements of Markdown. If anyone's familiar with having different heading styling, this would make your heading smaller, less would make your heading larger. So it's not too important for our class to make things all look visually appealing, but if you want to get into some of the details in doing that, please go ahead. But for now, I'll just use one hashtag. That's just a title heading, and let's introduce this notebook as our introduction. And so you'll see on the right how it will appear when someone reads this, and below that, without any hashtags, it's just regular text. And let's describe a little bit what's going to be in this notebook. So for other demos, there's going to be a lot more content. This one is really just to give a brief overview of how to use Google Colab and a little bit of the different aspects that I'll expect when it comes down to plotting any type of data. So let's talk about that a little bit here. All right. And we can move things around, which is pretty handy. So if you just use these buttons up here, let's put that towards the top where you can move it around, play around with it, get comfortable. You can delete things using this. So a lot of this, if you have more questions, all of the information you can find is out there on Google. So definitely would implore you the self-sufficiency to explore and learn more at your own pace. So other things that we should talk about for our class, it's generally best practice in Python to make sure any package you use, and a package is essentially just a toolkit of all the different tools that someone else built. for you. So you don't need to rebuild something from the ground up. It's already done for you. So these are different packages. And some of the core packages we'll be using for this class is something called pandas, matplotlib, a little bit of statistics packages. And these will help us work and wrangle with data for pandas. Matplotlib helps us plot things, and statistics gives us a lot of the different tools for working with all the statistical concepts that we'll be covering in class. So it's best practice to make sure that your packages that you use are all imported at the top. And the reason behind this is that if someone were to be running through your code and there's a package that they didn't actually have downloaded that they need, they might run into a bug and it might crash their code at the end. So you'd rather get that all done with at the top. So make sure any package you import, it will always be at the top. And another thing to talk about is in coding, you want to be kind of using as few parts as possible. So sometimes you want to only import just the packages you need. You know, we can import lots of packages, but let's just use the things we need itself. And there's different, it's called like a kind of an alias where you might write something like this. So let's import pandas. But anytime we work with pandas, we're going to need to call it and say, use this package. So we're going to give it a nickname, and it shows here, which is pretty common as PD. So now anytime we write PD, we'll be calling the package pandas. So for this demo, we'll also be using matplotlib, and see, it already gives you a couple of handy code completion. So this is another way that we have an alias of anytime we want to plot, we'll just call PLT. So we just imported these two packages. Let's hit run. And a nice thing with Google Colab, a lot of these kind of basic utilities, we'll call them, of these packages are already all downloaded for you. Throughout our semester, there really won't be too many packages that aren't already existing. We're really working with a lot of the core foundation things and nothing that you won't already have the tools available for you. Okay, so let's delete this. We don't really need this anymore. So I can either hit that delete, or I'm sure there's other ways. You can cut something, do undo. So let's just hit cut that cell. So we don't need it. So we talked about Markdown. That's what this looks like. Cells is something that you can execute, and you can comment things. Anytime you are working with code, it's always a good idea to add comments to describe what it is that you are doing. It helps not only you organize your own thoughts, but also other people if they read your code and they want to know what it is that you're doing if things aren't necessarily straightforward. So again, this isn't really like a coding class, so we don't need to worry about these things. It's really a statistics class where we're just using Python as a tool. So don't worry too much about any of the details. Let's talk about what it would look like to plot something and the core elements that we'll need next. So let's talk about creating kind of just a sample data set. So let's make our sample, let's make a list of things, and we'll make it into a data frame. So let's just make a nested list where it's the numbers 1, 3, 5, and now let's make this into just a data frame. And again, I'm calling pandas with the PD. But for our class, we'll be working more with real data. So this is not anything you need to remember. I'm just using this for demonstration purposes. So now let's see. I just saved this as a variable, which there's more information from the tutorial that I linked to in our homework assignment of what that actually means if I'm saving a variable here. So let's see what that might look like if I hit sample. And really the best way to troubleshoot anything is just to look at it, see what's going on in it. So we see this is now a little data frame where we have 3 different observations. But this might not actually be what I wanted to get. So let me actually just go on to Stack Overflow, which is a great resource for just finding answers to things. So let me find just example data frame. This will be good just for us to go through something. Okay, this is helping just to give us a good example. So this is essentially what I was trying to find. I think my list was a little bare bones. So I'm just finding a good answer for this on Stack Overflow. So this is good for us to talk about. You should be familiar with this website by the end of our class, because it really helps you find what you're looking for. Coding, I feel like, is not really about knowing everything. It's just knowing the right question to ask. Okay, so I'm just copying and pasting this one line. That'll just make us a better data frame than what I had here. So we'll save this as data frame. And now let's see what that looks like. So I just overrode the example of data frame. And now we have something that looks a little bit more user-friendly, of 2 columns, A and B, and these are the different variables. So now let's just plot this by using this. And again, let's not worry too much about what it is that we're trying to do here. It's more just to talk about how to work in a Colab environment. So don't worry about this code. You won't need to redo any of this. I just wanted to show you how this might look. So as easy as just writing plot, we see these 2 columns, and this is really the important part of what I want to discuss. So showing this in an assignment is not enough. I have no idea what I'm looking at. The important elements, let's make a new Markdown cell that will talk about this. Let's say required. And let's make this a numbered list. So the first thing, and we'll get more into this when we talk about data visualization, but I just want to talk about this kind of as our just foundational stepping stone for class. So the first thing I need to see is a title. The second thing, I need axes labels. And the third thing is your interpretation below. This is the critical part, especially as an MBA student, being able to communicate your findings and say, this is what's important in this visualization. It's kind of the why bother with any of this. So having that below the graph is really important. So let's talk about how we would have these things. In all of my demonstrations, I'll have all that code there for you. So you won't need to write anything from scratch. You'll just be able to reuse what I've already provided for you. But if these elements are not added, I will deduct 10% from the total score of the homework. So even if you got everything 100% right, if your graphs are missing any of these elements, your total points will be deducted by 10%. So this stuff is serious. All right, so let's add a title. And I'm just writing this based off my memory of syntax, but you could, of course, look and type into Google how to add a title, which is that this is the way to add it. So let's pretend this is 2 different rabbits and where they are on a grid. So let's call it rabbits on grid, and let's see what that looks like. So now we have a title. So we checked off the first requirement. Next, let's add an X label for the X axis, the horizontal axes. And let's call this just the, space on the ground in feet. This is all very silly stuff, but I just wanted to use it to demonstrate what it is that matters most. And on the y-axis, let's just say speed in miles per hour. So I don't know if this really makes sense, but let's just pretend that we have these two rabbits on a grid and they're moving in space and this is their speed. So now we have a little bit of a story and we have 1 and 2 done, but for 3, this is the most important part, and that's that interpretation. So I just might have done that a little too quick by hitting the add for text. So we'll add a little text below it to say, what do we see in this? So okay, so first, just what is it that I'm looking at? And then what strikes you as interesting? So for me, I see both rabbits start at a generally same level of speed, and then it goes up after, they moved 1 foot from the starting point. So they start at similar levels in speed, and then as they progress, and then rabbit B starts to take the lead. All right. If this was a more interesting case study, especially when it comes down to our real world data examples, I'd expect a little bit more of why does this matter? For this, it's 2 rabbits, none of this matters. So we're good with that. Great. So those are what I would expect from a graph. And again, this code will be there, so you can really just copy and paste it and put it in your own homework assignments. So last in this demo, when it comes to the code, before we get to how I would expect this to be submitted as an assignment on Blackboard, let's talk about how referencing someone else's code, how you would do it, and just the importance of it. Outside of plagiarism, it's really important to promote open source culture, especially when it comes to information that you found helpful, other people might find it helpful. So making sure that any code you reference from someone else, like even this, maybe I should have referenced it from that, but it's pretty kind of standard. Like I don't know, it's kind of with a grain of salt how much reference to give, but for something like this, probably, yeah, let me add where I got this from. So let's add a little text cell and say code referenced. And that's really all it takes. So now someone who saw this will now know that my code for this example was referenced from here. But really, we added on to it by creating a visualization. This was not on the original post. So not only are we giving recognition, but we're adding to information that's already out there in a reproducible way. So for the homework, where you will go through these different examples, something like just giving the link in a Markdown cell, similar to what we just did above. So let's add a new homework. And so the homework assignment, I have the link open here, where you'll create your first Collab notebook, and you will go through these 3 different tutorial, and they're all really short, just on purpose. Again, this isn't a coding class, just having a basic understanding of how to move things around is probably really sufficient. So you will go through these, and then you'll upload your assignment to Blackboard. So I just have the link to one of these open. So let's say we're going through something like this. I would encourage you not to just copy and paste it from here, because it's harder to learn, just like your tactile sense, but actually just like type it out. It's very okay to struggle. When I was first learning any of this stuff, it just takes time, and it takes the struggle to learn it. So Something like this, you might want to add it to a different screen. So let me just make this small on one side. And we'll put this on the other side. So something like, I am in an apartment instead of I am in NYC. You can make it anything. So I'm saving this. And now let's print that. And we see what it would look like. So for homework, you'll go through this. You can essentially just copy what is here and maybe take your own creative license and add new things and really just play around with it. I'm not expecting too much rigorous code in this first one. Really, next week, we'll actually get into real content that will be a bit more time consuming. But for now, really just want you to get familiar, want us to troubleshoot any of the issues. And then we'll go from there. So I won't go into this too much because really all the content you need is already available here. And if you decide to go into other tutorials, that sounds great. Definitely more is, if you're curious, I would say pursue that curiosity further and add it here. I'll take a look, and if it's interesting, share it on our Slack channel if you found a good resource that you think other students would benefit from as well. Okay. And once you're done going through that homework tutorial assignment, how to actually submit this homework. So let's title this something. You can change this up here. Let's call this Introduction Part 2, just because the first time I tried this, I wasn't sharing my screen. So we'll call this Part 2, and we'll do something like share. All I need is a link, and I need to make sure that I can access it. So if you're worried that I am unable to, you can share this with SUNY New Paltz, but I know some folks might not be using a SUNY New Paltz Gmail account, so then they wouldn't be able to access it. So if you wanted to just play it safe, anyone with this link can either view or comment. For me, if I wanted to provide comments, you need to have commenting enabled. Otherwise, I'm just going to look at it and give a grade. But you don't need to grant editing rights because you might not want someone to be able to go in there and change things. So we'll change that link. We'll copy that. And all you need to do in the assignments when you go to complete homework 1, you would copy and paste that link and make sure it's formatted in a way that then I can access it. So you'll hit submit, and that's how you'll get a grade. So I'm not going to submit it right here. And make sure that you don't need to submit 3 separate notebooks. You can really put everything all in one. If you do, that's fine, as long as all the links are there. One last thing to just discuss. Actually, I lied, maybe 2 last things. So one other thing is how I will be able to see if there are any edits to the notebook after the deadline of the homework submission. There's a handy feature of revision history, so we can even see when we started this to when we ended it, what was the difference in versioning. So I will only grade what is submitted before the deadline time date. But definitely feel free if you learn new things and wanted to add stuff later, please do. Okay, and the last thing I'll talk about is how I will be sharing all of this to our GitHub. As I mentioned in the introduction, that Google Colab has a pretty handy way to share things directly to GitHub without needing to know any other coding skills, such as using Git itself. So just by using this file, save a copy in GitHub, I already connected it to our repo. And let's put this, I just need to change the file path. So let's call this, I know this by heart, just my notebooks, module 0. And let's change our commit message, which is pretty much just telling everyone else what it is that is in this. So let's say remake of Python demo. And I'm just going to merge this right away. So again, don't worry about any of these other details, but this is outside of scope for our class. So let's just hit OK. I just wanted to show you what that would look like, because now that'll bring us to our repo. and it'll show you right here in module 0. We have the one that I recorded yesterday and the one we recorded today. And what's really nifty is that you can just hit open in Colab and it'll bring you back. So if you ever need a link to things in the future, everything will be here. So, and it looks pretty nice, in my opinion. So we see our graph, we see what it is we're looking at, we see the required elements. And if you wanted to, link this to other things, definitely feel free to do that. So that is the end of this part 2 of our first lecture. And going forward, we'll be using these elements and diving into more statistics. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.